We just finished up hosting a workshop on ChatGPT within which we realized that we're done for and are about to become obsolete like this week.
Let's back up a minute. First of all, we did not teach the workshop. I want to position myself as a learner in this work.
I said we hosted.
Yeah, no, I just want to be clear.
Okay.
Shout out to Patricia. Do you yet know how to pronounce Patricia's last name?
I mean, I always say Patricia Grenseman, but I don't know. That could be wrong.
Okay, well, Patricia taught...
We're going to put Patricia's link in the show notes.
Yes, Patricia taught a workshop on ChatGPT in your work, and we're literally just coming off of that call. And to Brooke's point, yes, we discovered very quickly that Patricia has basically created her own business coach.
Pretty much. I mean, but here's the thing. Beyond that, I'm not even worried about that part.
Like, great. Good for you. I'm glad you're not worried.
I'm just not. Here, I feel like if ChatGPT ends up being as good as us at being a business coach, then that's just going to free us up to get more technical and talk about more specific little narrow things that we want to specialize in. We'll figure that part out.
You're not concerned that ChatGPT is going to steal our jobs?
No.
Okay.
What I am worried about is, hear me out.
I'm listening.
There's this show called Life on Our Planet. Now, I like to watch nature documentaries. I know that you're not a nature documentary person.
Yeah,
so
my brain's already gone offline, but I'll try to stay with you.
Yeah, Tristan's brain, your brain tends to go offline a lot when I'm talking.
That's so not true.
Anytime that I'm teaching anything to do with, I don't know, like, it's like half of the stuff that I teach in our programs, Tristan, and as soon as I start talking, you go... My brain, if anyone else here's brain has gone offline, I'm like, well, we know that yours has.
Yes! That's part of why you and I get along so well, is because you get to bring things into my consciousness that I would otherwise not be able to absorb or integrate.
Mm-hmm. Well, are you absorbing it when your brain's offline?
Well, that's the thing. I usually say that as a statement to acknowledge my experience.
You're bringing it back.
While also saying, I'm going to stay with you as best as I can while you explain this nature documentary reference.
Okay. Here's the thing. In this docuseries, Life on Our Planet, I highly recommend that if you have any interest in the history of our planet, that you watch it. It's really cool. It's a partially CGI, partially real footage nature documentary that is supposed to be showing all of the mass extinctions that our planet has endured and how evolution has moved through each of those mass extinctions, and ultimately we've gotten here. So mass extinction is something that happens on a regular basis in the Earth's history. And typically what happens is things are just kind of plodding along, and then all of a sudden, something happens, and there's this really fast reaction that our ecosystem can't endure. So, for example, when the Earth started growing things, so everything used to grow in water. Everything was in water. And then land emerged, but there wasn't life on land. And then life emerged on land. And when land started to become green, the greening of land, all of a sudden we had this massive boom in new life on land, and it threw off, I mean, watch the documentary if you want like the real version of this. I haven't watched it in like probably, I think I've watched it twice, but it's been probably 2 years since I watched it last. I don't even remember when it came out. But the point is, it was like, boom, all of a sudden there was life popping up everywhere, and it threw off the equilibrium on the planet, and then there was a mass extinction. Similar to like there's an algae bloom in the ocean, and similar thing happens where it kills everything off. So the question is, what is the thing that is next going to take off super quickly and throw off the equilibrium of our planet and our ecosystem?
And you think it's ChatGPT?
No.
I'm kidding.
I don't think it's ChatGPT. But what I do think is when we look at evolutionarily, what is evolving out of our current history is intelligence. You look at humans, right? Since the last mass extinction, we are now here. What is different about us that has allowed us to move at such a rapid rate compared to other life? I think it's intelligence. Now intelligence is it emerged out of us, but now we're creating something outside of our bodies that houses it. And what I'm describing here is the plot of every science fiction
and horror
film ever where artificial intelligence has taken over and humans have become...
Yeah. And I love how at some point in the ChatGPT workshop, there was like some commentary about anthropomorphizing the ChatGPT and like projecting person or like making the GPT into a person in some way, shape, or form. And it's like, yeah, that's what all those movies are about. All of them.
Yeah.
You know? Mm-hmm. I mean, we can start with Terminator because that's in my mind, the OG. However, we have now since taken that, whole genre and evolved it into like the way that people are playing with cell phones, like Her. Mm-hmm. Remember that movie with Joaquin Phoenix?
Oh, yeah.
And he like develops his relationship with his cell phone person that feels really real to him, played by Scarlett Johansson. Never see the person because it's his fucking cell phone. It's just a voice. Exactly. Yeah. Also, there's a new Megan Fox movie. Shout out to those who even know who she is. And where she plays a robot, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing. When the mass extinction happens, something survives.
Yes.
And evolution picks up from there.
Yes.
As intelligence leaves us and our human bodies and enters machines and the cloud and whatever that don't require living conditions that we require, I think we're done for.
See, now that goes back to the OG, which is Terminator. They predicted all of this already.
Well, it's not just Terminator. It's like the entire science fiction genre, I feel like, is based on.
I kind of feel like Terminator is some sort of biblical situation here. I mean, if we just stopped at Terminator 1, I wouldn't make this argument. But the fact that there are 3 parts plus a television show.
I'm hovering over the microphone waiting for my opportunity. I'll be back.
I mean, that isn't even the most memorable...
I'll be back.
No. The memorable line is not I'll be back.
Then you do the memorable line into the microphone.
Come with me if you want to live.
Come with me if you want to live.
That wasn't a very good Arnold.
Arnold. You do it. Do Arnold.
Arnold.
Okay, everybody. I want you to vote. Don't tell me that mine wasn't good and then come out with that. Okay, official entries. Ready? We're about to make our official entry. What will the term be? And then they're going to vote on who did the better Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay, we're going to play the original, and then we're each going to submit our entry.
Okay.
Ready? This is the original.
You queued it up.
Come with me if you want to live.
You going first?
I'm going first.
Okay.
Come with me if you want to live. That was terrible. Like, can I have a redo?
Sure.
Okay. I was like, whoa, that wasn't the right one. Hold on. Come with me if you want to live.
Wow. Was that it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I'm
Ready?
not good with accents. You go.
Come with me if you want to live.
Okay, I vote you. ChatGPT is really complicated. It's not like there isn't an impact in using it.
Right.
And we are also, you did some research and discovered that the impacts of our use of ChatGPT are comparable to other things we're already using.
For example, one ChatGPT query uses 10 times the energy of a single Google search and the amount of power that it takes to burn a 60-watt light bulb for 5 minutes.
Right. So...
Did you realize that 10 Google searches took...
a lot of energy
that it takes? But did you realize that, like, actually, like, keeping a lamp on does, too? Because this is what I'm talking about.
This directly connects to the claim that we could be, dun dun dun, anti-capitalist in our businesses. You cannot escape the system in which you live. You cannot escape the existence of being a human. Being a human right now means that AI is being developed and used more and more. Are we supposed to turn away and say, well, let's just ignore that thing that's being developed and used for so many different, probably really intelligent reasons? We just have to use it critically. Well, to me, the same thing can be said about the conversation about being in a capitalist world while running a business.
Yes.
And I feel like this is the part of the conversation that gets missed when we just claim we can be anti-capitalist in business. It's like painting over it with a broad stroke, much like when we say, don't use ChatGPT, it takes too much energy. We're just painting over a very nuanced conversation with a broad stroke.
We want to talk about the ethical business trend.
Yes.
And the anti-capitalist business trend. And what started with my extreme frustrations with this conversation, and then we started talking about it more and more, and now has become a regular part of our dialogue, to the point that it's like I hesitate to say it because I feel like there is so little space for context and nuance and critical thinking in this conversation. You're supposed to feel a certain way about it. You're supposed to use certain words, and the words that we use signal what team we're on.
Correct.
I am by no means let's all go out and try to just get as rich as possible and not consider the impact. But what I will say is that we now use the term late stage capitalism as a joke because I hear it so often. And I will go ahead and say that 90% of the time that I hear it, I am pretty certain the person has no idea what it means.
Okay, so I'm going to back up. And I'm going to say that I was first introduced to the phrase late-stage capitalism by someone who I perceived to be more radical than myself. And so I adopted it without digging into it critically. To me, I interpreted it to mean we are in the end times of capitalism, and that at some point in maybe even our lifetime, we will see some sort of revolution that will yield a new way of being. Now, then you and I started talking about it, and you kind of brought a different flavor to the perspective that I had. Would you like to explain how you approach this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you're... Okay, so I get caught up in a few things that I don't think are entirely necessary for this conversation. First of all, I have a lot of issues with Karl Marx. I know a lot of people love Karl Marx. What I will say is the term late-stage capitalism, I don't know that Karl Marx was using that term exactly. I think that a scholar put this term to Karl Marx's work after, but it comes out of Karl Marx's work.
Yes.
It is a Marxist concept. And the concept is that essentially capitalism's natural end is this workers' revolution.
Right.
So I don't think that is off.
Right.
When you say that we're going to meet some end. But I think that when we look at the timeline of capitalism and when Karl Marx was talking about this, like Karl Marx thought that he was in the end times of capitalism while he was writing about it. Time keeps ticking by, and I don't actually see us getting any closer to a workers' revolution. Do I think that people are pissed? Yes. Do I think that we see all kinds of reasons that things are wrong with? Yes. Do I think that more pressure is being put on the system? Sure. I also think that the grip that capitalism has on us is actually probably the strongest it's ever been. So I'm just like, what are we talking about?
You're not. First of all, I want to underscore two things you said. One, Karl Marx believed that he was witnessing late stage, end stage capitalism.
And like, maybe he was, and we want to say, well, end stage, late stage capitalism is this long period that maybe started around when Karl Marx was writing about this and extends maybe beyond our lifetime.
Sure.
If that's the case, I would say let's compare that to the actual timeline of when we industrialized and saw this version of capitalism. I think we're talking about like 90% of the timeline at that point. And to call that the end stage just seems
a little mistaken.
So, I could be, by the way, I'm not an economist. I could be wrong about some of these points. Like, if anyone is like, no, you're mistaken about, like, some economist, no, sure. But the point is that I just want us to talk about what we're talking about instead of using these terms that we've all agreed to use to signal that, quote, things are bad. Boo capitalism is essentially what we're saying. I don't like being alive right now. Things are hard. I feel like that's actually what people are saying when they use this term. And I just want us to like get more specific about the functions that we're seeing play out, or the systems that we're seeing play out, or the things that we could actually change that could do something, rather than just saying late stage capitalism and throwing our hands up. It like bypasses the conversation.
Are you saying that me simply saying I run an ethical and anti-capitalist business may actually not mean that I run an ethical and anti-capitalist business?
Okay. So here's where I'm going to slip into what really might piss people off. But I just want you to think about it. And I want you to understand that I am on your team. I think we're on the same team.
Yeah, we're on, first of all, values clarification. Capitalism is not working for us.
No.
I mean, I'm not thriving.
No.
I don't know anybody, actually, who's, like, really thriving in this financial economic moment and system.
No.
You know?
No.
So we're not, like, again, to your point, we're not saying yay capitalism.
No. Also, I absolutely value human beings over money. But the idea that capitalism is a value system of money over people is not actually definitionally what it even is. And I think that that's how people are using it.
Should we define the actual definition?
Sure.
Okay. So the actual definition, I'm using a dictionary app.
Great.
It's called Dictionary. Capitalism. It's a noun. An economic system in which investment in and ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange of wealth is made and maintained chiefly by private individuals or corporations, especially as contrasted to cooperatively or state-owned means of wealth.
Right. So one of the things that I often say, if it's not run privately, it is run publicly, cooperatively. And we have seen the ways that our governments function, and I don't actually feel any safer having our government
be responsible.
For, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like, well, they still are anyways, right? We're not, like, the government. Yeah, exactly, because you can't separate capitalism from the democracy, quote unquote, that we live in.
Absolutely.
Or you can't separate capitalism from the racist institutions,
absolutely.
Right? Like, the two go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And so the government on some level is having an influence / impact over the economy, goods and services, the rates at which we pay for things, exchange things, et cetera, et cetera. And we're saying under an alternative model, the government would have even more possibility of controlling everything that in regarding to labor and the economy.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of work to do with our other systems.
Yes.
We don't need to get into the specific details of the economic system that we want to see.
True. This one's not working.
That's not really what this is about.
No.
What this is about is, I want us to understand the way that our systems work and be critical about how we can challenge them ourselves in this moment in a more informed way, instead of just saying, oh, this is capitalism, and throwing up our hands, and then thinking that if we create values-aligned work, we're somehow not participating.
I see what you're saying.
We are. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make some people very uncomfortable, but is the truth. People who believe in free market capitalism would say, well, the market is going to sort it out, because what will happen is people will see that capitalism is functioning in such a way that undermines their values. They will start to demand that companies and organizations are more ethical and run their businesses more ethically and only support the organizations that do that. And that will create a market pressure on these organizations to course correct. And that is how free markets are supposed to work. So when we say, I'm going to do everything in alignment with my values, I'm going to introduce sliding scale pricing, I'm going to talk about how we can challenge our systems within our businesses. You're not operating outside of capitalism. You're actually just doing the very thing that people who support free markets predicted you would do. So
you're actually not anti-capitalist, is what you're saying.
I mean, I don't...
I mean, okay, so then what does it mean to be anti-capitalist? Okay, and that's the thing, I think. Okay, it's a lot, I'm going to add that to me it's a lot like the word ally. We can use it to mean the intention of something. As in, I believe in this. Right? But that doesn't mean that we can call ourselves allies as if it's a fixed way to describe ourselves. Because there's going to be ways that we let that down all the time. We're human beings.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
So you can't opt out of the systems we live in, aka capitalism. In fact, if you're going to run a business and charge for your services, you are existing within capitalism.
Yeah.
You can hold values that are against the system in contrast to the system we live in that are anti-capitalist, but to call yourself an anti-capitalist business,
I'm just confused. I don't understand how that possibly exists.
it's a contradiction.
And here's the thing. I am not concerned if you're listening to this and you currently are calling yourself an anti-capitalist, whatever. I have no problem with you.
Totally.
Use the language that you want to use. Be critical about why you're using it the way that you are. Maybe be specific about what that means. Great. What I'm concerned about is people who are monetizing the concept of anti-capitalism.
Yes.
It is capitalism dressed up to look like something else.
Yes.
And it is not honest, and it is definitely not ethical. Because if I am a business coach and I am telling you I have figured out a way to help you run a quote anti-capitalist business, and then I'm giving you a whole bunch of hoops to jump through that ultimately just make us feel good about the way that we're doing things, but ultimately you're still participating in the same system. You've now created... When I think about the people who are entering these kinds of programs, they are probably the most disadvantaged people I know.
Yeah.
So now we've taken the most disadvantaged, high integrity people who we know and said, yeah, I'm going to, let's do the mental gymnastics together of figuring out a way where we can make ourselves feel like we're not participating in this system. It just feels like we are extracting money from people who are looking at the system, not wanting to participate in it, have all of this such good intentions and want to find a better way. And then you have a business coach saying, oh, I can show you the way to make money but not participate in capitalism. And I'm just like, but I don't know that you can.
No.
And what I would love to do is say, rather than creating all of this work for ourselves to try to make ourselves feel like we're not participating when ultimately we're all being forced to, I actually want to say to the people who are really high integrity and care, hey, give yourself a fucking break because you need to survive right now.
Exactly.
And you are not hurting people by providing a quality service, engaging in a consensual agreement where someone wants to give you money to provide that service for them and then going on and living your life. That is not the thing that is causing the tremendous amount of suffering right now if you're doing it in a way that is aligned with your values. If you want to call that anti-capitalist, fine. I disagree. But I guess it just feels like
it's another fucking buzzword that from what I'm hearing you say, we are using to bypass deeper work and conversation about how we actually challenge the system rather than just throw our hands up in the air, call us anti-capitalist, but then ultimately unconsciously or subconsciously perpetuate all the things we say.
And that's what it's about, right? That's what it's about. It's about the fact that because of the nature of the system that we're operating within, we can use different words. We can tell ourselves we're doing something totally radical and totally different. Some people are, by the way.
Yes.
Right? But for the most part, actually, what I'm seeing is the system is replicating.
Yes.
We're replicating and upholding
Yes.
the very system that we're saying that we're against. And we're just using different language. And that is not the change that I think is... I don't... It's just not what we're trying to do.
No, it isn't. It feels to me like putting ethical and anti-capitalist into our messaging and marketing is possibly one of the more manipulative and disingenuous things I've seen us as well-intentioned people do in our businesses in the last few years.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying us like you and me, I'm saying like as a collective, it makes sense that people have fallen into this, like, yeah, I want to get on the ethical train. I want to get on the anti-capitalist train. This matters to me. If I can just use these words, if these are my ethics, these are my values, but, like, what does it actually mean when we say we are ethical or anti-capitalist in our business? Mm-hmm. When you and I talk about ethical, even, would you break that down? Because, yeah, you've helped me understand what that means, too.
I mean...
This is I'm asking you to because, and this is why my brain goes offline sometimes when it's like you bring a different lens to things.
Well, okay,
than
so
I do.
To give some background, for anyone who doesn't know, I was in a 20-year relationship with a philosopher who focused on political philosophy and the economy, and so some of this stuff is like I have that doesn't make me a scholar in it at all, but I have a certain level of understanding where I get kind of frustrated hearing these conversations because I feel like it's just misinformed. And one of those does come down to ethics, because at the end of the day, I can't tell you what your ethics are. Ethics, a code of ethics, is something that you decide.
It's individual.
It's an individual
or
thing.
Like collective within a community, but it's not like when you say ethical, it means the same thing to every person.
Yeah, right. Like, because to the point of that we're having right now, right? We need to have a whole bunch of critical conversations to figure out how things are working and what the effects and impacts are of certain things in order for us to understand how we then want to operate. And that's what a code of ethics would come out of. Your individual values and your business values are ultimately what's going to determine what for you is ethical. And I think that when business coaches and people in the business development world start to say that they know how you can be ethical without doing a lot of research and critical thinking behind it to bring something original and nuanced kind of to the surface to say, here's how we know these different kinds of behaviors impact people. Here's how we know right? Without doing that, actually what you're doing is you're just imposing your own your own thoughts on other people. They could be great, but they also could be like not that well thought through. And what frustrates me is I think that we have so many brilliant, really high integrity people out there who are not voicing their opinions, not marketing their work, not starting the thing and confidently going out and starting to kind of put themselves out there because they're looking to certain people who have decided that they're an authority on ethical business to tell them what they should or shouldn't do. And that bothers me.
Understandably.
When I first started getting like really heated about this, because I will just say, for people who have known me for a long time, I used to do a lot of ranting on the internet about different people who I saw doing things that I thought were problematic. And at some point I stopped because I was like, why am I focusing on that so much and not focusing on just what my work is and doing a really good job? Like, why am I not just staying in my lane and figuring out how I want to run my business? And I also started to see that there are a lot of people who essentially are gaining trust by saying everyone else is wrong and bad and doing it wrong and doing things that are terrible. Here are all of the red flags that you should look out for people who are out there who you shouldn't work with. Here are all of the people who have done terrible things. And should we hold people accountable? Absolutely. Someone saying, look at all of these examples of where other coaches have been shitty. That doesn't make them an expert in how to run your business.
Exactly. Yes.
And what I want us thinking about is you, as a human being, in your life with your business. What are your goals? What do you need support with? Let's get you specific support on the specific things that you know you need help with from the people who are best at doing it, rather than outsourcing our decision making to people who have made themselves famous by labeling themselves ethical.
I see what you're saying.
It's gross.
Yeah.
It really pisses me off.
Because it feels like what it has come down to now are that, and I think I said this at the beginning, that ethical and anti-capitalist are both empty often now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Empty of real, like, what does it mean, though?
Right.
Show me.
Mm-hmm.
And also, this is the larger conversation, too. I don't just want to be told. Mm-hmm. I need to see it in action. Mm-hmm. And if you're claiming ethical or anti-capitalist, I then expect that I'm going to engage in your business in a way that feels different to me than quote-unquote mainstream businesses. Mm-hmm. But if I then get to your website and there's a countdown timer or I don't know what, mm-hmm. right? Like, then you're actually not doing anything different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or challenging the norm, or mm-hmm. challenging it's just manipulative in and of itself.
Yes, and I'm going to take this one step further and say that if your whole shtick is that you teach an anti-capitalist approach to business, mm-hmm. and what you're selling is the idea, mm-hmm. the fantasy, mm-hmm. that you can just go out into the world with your values and your skills and make an abundance of money off of them without participating in capitalism.
Yeah, it's so wrong.
I
see what you're saying.
Are lying.
Yes.
You are selling something that is not true. Real.
Yes.
And you have now become an example of where capitalism can go really wrong.
Yes.
It's grifting.
Yes.
It is a grift. It's snake oil.
You're absolutely right.
So can we just stop and just say, we're running businesses. Mm-hmm. That's complicated.
Yep.
We're operating within capitalism. That's complicated. Yep. I have to pay my bills every month.
Yep.
Where I'm not going to have a place to live.
Totally.
I need to afford health care.
Yep.
Also, my mental health is kind of important, and it requires money to go to therapy,
yep.
go to yoga,
yep.
have a gym membership.
Yep.
All of that requires money. That means that I have to make money.
Yes.
And the way that I make that money, unfortunately, is going to require me to go out and participate in that very system that I have an issue with.
Yes.
Let's be mindful about how we do it, so that we don't end up just mindlessly going with the flow and replicating things or upholding things that we actually are against,
yes.
right? That's how I want to see us go into this, because I think that what it positions us to do is say, hey, I'm watching this particular function play out in the online business world. For example, I'm watching false scarcity play out.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying in their emails and in their social posts, we only have 10 spots available.
Yep.
There's limited spots available.
Yep.
Make sure that you sign
spots
up now.
Spots are going fast.
They're going fast. It's going to sell out, right? And they're lying.
Lying.
And what it's doing is it's making people make decisions that
yes.
are not really informed by their circumstances. They're now in something that they didn't really need to buy,
yep.
right? That's not good.
Yep. So
what's a different way that we can motivate people
yeah.
to actually sign up for the thing without lying to them?
Yes.
That is a much different conversation than, boo, capitalism.
Now, when you think, if we go the route of not lying to people, mm-hmm. is manipulation still involved? Now, we've talked about this off the podcast. I understand there is an agreement amongst...
Can we just give the specific conversation?
Sure.
And we don't need to name who it was.
Oh, we can name.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were talking to somebody else who has a business.
My father.
Okay. Gary Katz.
Gary Katz.
I've been watching all of these YouTube videos of people with sailboats, and I'm realizing, like, I am just glued to these just, like, basically day in the life videos of, like, oh, we did this and we did that today and whatever, and I love watching it. Then it makes me feel like I relate to the person. And then, all of a sudden, I'm, like, interested in whatever other content they have, or now I want to get a sailboat, and, right? And then he said, so I'm going to start making video content like this.
Yes.
And I'm going to help them, I'm going to really relate to people on a human level by showing them more of, like, the day in the life and whatever. And then when my book comes out, people will have, I would have created this connection.
Yes.
And then they'll be ready for my book.
Yes.
I'm being really manipulative.
Yes.
And you said, no, you're not.
I immediately got activated and I was like, no, Dad, that's authenticity. That's not manipulation. This is what I teach all the time. How dare you not understand that I do this in my work?
And what I said was, I think after listening to you two argue for a while, I think that you're both right. I think this is great.
Are you inviting me to hold multiple truths?
I think that when we say, I'm going to create a strategy in which I'm going to create connection with people through this kind of video content so that when I want to sell them something, they're ready to buy. And the reason that we're doing that is to get them to make a purchase. I think we're hard-pressed to say that that's in no way manipulative. I think in some way, that definitionally speaking, I think that it is manipulative. But I think that what you're saying is, yeah, but the thing that you're using in that strategy is authenticity.
It's authenticity, so then is it manipulation if it's authentic?
And, like...
Okay.
I just don't know that it's true that manipulation is...
in contrast to authenticity?
I think that this is an example where they're existing together.
Okay,
yeah.
So here's the thing. According to the dictionary app, yet again, the definition of manipulate, a verb, to manage or influence skillfully, especially in an unfair manner. To adapt or change to suit one's purpose or advantage, right? So on some level, it is baked into the word that it's for self-serving.
Well, there's 3 definitions there, and one of them at the end says, especially in an unfair manner.
Yes.
So if we want to go with that one, yes.
That's number one.
It's necessarily negative. But there's 3 other definitions?
There's 3 other definitions. Generally speaking, though, we typically, when we say manipulative, we're using the first one, right? And I think this goes back to like an even bigger question, which is like, do relationships exist without manipulation? Like, are we manipulating in our relationships all the time? Like, is that just a part of,
Yeah. So there's oh my gosh, what's her name? Nat Liu, I want to say is this person's name. I remember hearing an interview that she did years ago with Tiffany Hahn on Tiffany's podcast. And she said something like, people-pleasing is actually manipulative.
Yes.
Because when you start just bending over backwards to anybody's request because you think that it's going to then give you some kind of credit to then, I don't know, like have them treat you the same way or what, like if you're not holding your boundary because it's going to give you something, right? Like in that relationship, you're actually kind of manipulating the situation.
Sure, you could say that.
You could also say that
it's a fucking trauma response.
It's a trauma response. This person was triggered. Maybe the fact that there's something that comes on the other end. Like, I just don't think that it's black and white.
I agree with you. And so marketing, as it relates to It's interesting. It's like not all marketing is inherently manipulative, but it also kind of is sometimes.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it is. I think that, like, if we're going to sit down and create a strategy to try to influence people's behavior, but then we're going to do all of these mental gymnastics to try to make ourselves feel like we're not being manipulative when, like, on some level, like, I don't... Does it matter?
Okay, so then the other way I can make sense of it is, like, okay, I remember somebody once saying to me, well, isn't it just a performance to show up on social media and market your work? It's just a performance. It's how can it be genuine or authentic when, like, it's literally a performance? You can't not... You can't avoid the performance piece. I'm like, okay, that's true. And we can embrace that or move through that in a way that is ignoring. And, for example, we could say, like, yeah, all marketing does have a tone of manipulation to it. Even the, like, quote-unquote well-intentioned stuff. And that... we could use that in duplicitous ways and lean into it, or we can be conscious that that is a component and be extra sensitive and caring around it. And to me, when we throw anti-capitalist or ethical on our business and into our messaging, what I see is most often we are using it to make ourselves feel better. We're using it to signal something outwardly to make our ideal clients or audience feel better. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing our due diligence to create the actual care in action that is needed to live into the thing we're claiming to live into.
Yeah. And my guess is, I mean, listen, if changing our language were all that we needed to do... it would be a lot easier to create change. Language matters, for sure. But we can't just say...
I'm going to change my language.
I'm anti-capitalist. Let's be ethical.
Yep.
And, right? So, if the only thing that you're doing is using different language... guess what? It's a lot harder to evade capitalism than that. So if the only thing you're doing is changing your language and then you're done with it, I would make a bet that you're probably now giving yourself a pass.
Yeah.
On the things that you yourself are doing and replicating and upholding. And I'm not saying that you're bad or wrong for doing it, but I'm just saying that I think that I think we need to be more critical than that. And I think that sometimes we need to admit to ourselves, no, actually, I, as a business owner, am participating.
Yeah, in fact, I think...
I have power.
Yes. Personally, for me to have integrity as a business owner, given my values, I need to own the fact that I have this power and that I also have the power then to take care of myself and my community. And it's not going to be by saying... don't worry, I've got you, I'm anti-capitalist. Yeah. Because that's also ignoring the reality that they're in, too.
Right. One of our...
yeah, we could keep going and going.
Somebody in one of our programs had brought up... We kind of had this conversation, or maybe it was after my newsletter went out, where I kind of talked about this a little bit, but... they said that they've been really interested in looking at cooperative business models. And cooperative business models are so cool. Like, I'm working on a project right now, a consulting project with an organization that is a cooperative model. And for those of you who maybe are not quite familiar with how cooperatives work, you have members who essentially are the owners of the cooperative. So you pay in to be a member. You pay some kind of annual or monthly fee. And because you've paid in and invested, you get certain benefits. So it might be a certain discount that you get to use the service or something like that. People who are not owners or members can usually also use the service, but usually it's at like a higher rate. Or they don't have all of the benefits. And oftentimes the members can pass their benefits off to other groups or people who they want to benefit. So for example, there is a cooperative car share that I know of. And the way that they work is different organizations. For example, it might be a workforce training program. they have a hard time getting people to their trainings because the people who they're helping are not in the workforce, which means that many of them don't have vehicles. So they pay in to be a member or an owner of this car share. And then for anybody who signs up for their trainings, they give them the opportunity to use the car to get to the training.
Amazing.
That person can then use the car for free. They don't have to pay as much to allow them to use it because the subsidy is less because they're an owner and they get this benefit, right? Guess what? That is awesome. It is very different from how a lot of businesses work, but a cooperative business model is still a business model, and it is still existing within capitalism, and it is still based on the exchange of money, and it is still, it has to be set up that way to be financially viable within our current system. Yeah. It's just an innovative way to basically game the system to
be more equitable.
To be more equitable and bring your values to life. Yeah. And we as business owners, as entrepreneurs, that is what we get paid to do. We get paid to come up with new, cool ideas.
Yeah, which is a big part of, it's so funny to me. It's like, it's our responsibility to understand how to equitably meet our audience, community, clients' needs. It's not on them. Mm-hmm. And it's not on, it's as simple as a 3-tier pricing model and scholarship system. Those are some ingredients of what we're talking about. Yeah. And I think so often people think anti-capitalist, ethical, and they immediately think, there's a sliding scale in scholarships. It's like, no, actually. Mm-hmm. I think and again, this goes back to when you throw the words when you stamp the words on the product, you're not having the deeper conversation. Right. And I really think that a big part of the responsibility, to your point, on us as entrepreneurs is to understand the system we live in and meet people where they are at within that system. That also means meeting our needs too as entrepreneurs. Yes. And that means that sliding scale for every single thing you do isn't always going to be the right move. Right. Does that mean you're against your values? No. Mm-hmm. You can't always offer every single aspect of your work for every single person at whatever price point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's both. These are my values on the one hand. This is the reality of my life on the other hand.
Yes.
I'm going to have to do my best to blend these two things. And it might take some critical thinking and some innovation on my part to come up with new ways of doing things so that I can feel good about it.
Yes.
It's not going to be perfect. I can't opt out. So here's the best that I've got.
And this goes, if you're like, well, now what? If that's you right now in this conversation, by the way, go back and listen to some of our earlier episodes about offers creation and accessibility and pricing and things of that nature, because we've talked about how to make your work accessible in different ways throughout the podcast, really. Mm-hmm. But to me, this whole piece about how we categorize our businesses as ethical or anti-capitalist versus how we actually live into these values feels like a really good way actually to wrap up the last 10 conversations we've had or whatever it's been.
Yeah. I got really heated. There's a particular person who I've unfollowed long ago, but every now and then a lot of people who I know still follow this person, and so sometimes people will send me something of theirs or whatever, and somebody sent me a flyer for an event, and this person was like, we should go to this together, like let's drive out there together. And I opened it and I was like, okay, it's from this person, let's see what it is. And I read through it to be like, I was curious. I didn't just decide right off the bat like this person's bad, I don't. But it was an event that was all about ethical, non-manipulative selling, in which they were going to be teaching you how to use hypnosis in your sales.
I'm like,
copy.
What?
And I'm just like, first of all, what the fuck are you talking about?
Seriously.
How could it possibly not be manipulative for me to use techniques in my sales copy and in conversation with you where I'm influencing your behavior without knowing about it? How is that not the definition of manipulation?
Manipulation.
And So I want us to be aware, because what it reminds me of is, you remember when like the free range egg thing started becoming a thing?
Yes.
And then we found out that free range is nothing but a label, and it means like nothing. Like it doesn't mean anything. A farm could have the most unhappy, disgusting conditions, like inhumane conditions, but they meet one, bullshit requirement and allows them to slap a label that says free range on the carton, but nothing has actually changed, and it is not at all what you as the consumer have in mind when you think free range. That is what we are doing when we are doing the same shit as everyone else, but calling it something different to play on people's values. Right? That's what we're doing. We're playing on people's values. We're going, oh, you don't want to do wrong in the world? Well, don't worry. I have an ethical way that you can do this. And if we're not being thoughtful and critical about what we're teaching when someone ends up in that space with us,
it could be really bad.
It's predatory.
Yeah.
And I don't, if you're listening to this and you use these terms, I'm not saying that you are predatory. I actually...
Correct.
I would bet that the majority of people who are listening to this don't...
Correct.
...fall in that category. But I think that it's really important to have the conversation.
Yeah, the other thing, and I know we're nearing the end of, I think, the conversation. And the thing I'm thinking right now, too, is throw trauma-informed in this bucket as well.
Oh
if
my
I
God.
see one more person say trauma-informed, but, like, it's very clearly not, that is so dangerous and wrong. I think there's such an argument for every business owner having trauma training. Like, absolutely. I think every human being should receive training around
if
trauma.
you're working with human beings or interacting with human beings and you don't understand trauma, then you don't understand, like, human beings.
And human behavior.
Yeah.
Which is, like, so important for us to recognize, because it's coming up all the time, right? When we're holding people in the work that we do. But if I throw trauma-informed into my marketing because I've maybe taken a training or maybe listened to a couple podcasts or whatever, it's like that can go so wrong so fast. Mm-hmm. I mean, I hold safe spaces. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things that we are doing to signal our values.
Mm-hmm. It's like, it's the whole conversation about being performative allyship and saying everyone's welcome here.
Yes.
This is an inclusive space where, right, and then you signal you can come here and you're going to be okay, and just to have people come into that space, and if you haven't done the work, now you're systematically harming people.
Exactly.
And just like we have, I think, started to have that conversation in a pretty, I think that's like a, what am I trying to say? I think that that's a pretty big conversation. I think that people are aware of the fact that
a lot of people
it shouldn't just be performative, right? We need to be more thoughtful. I don't see as much about what it really means when you label yourself ethical. And when you label yourself trauma-informed, when you label yourself anti-capitalist. But you haven't really thought critically about what that actually means or made any changes or come up with a better way forward. Because that's my other thing, too, is if I tell you all of the things that I'm against, but I never tell you what I'm for, or if I tell you all the things that aren't working, but I never give you an alternative that does work, then
what kind of change are you actually...
Why am I asking you for money?
Exactly.
What am I giving you?
Exactly. Yeah. My brain's going to so many different things. I really think there's a value in saying my work is rooted in, or I seek to hold spaces that are informed by. Like, we do have to be vocal with language. We have to describe these things. And I think it's really important. And if we're just throwing these phrases into things without thinking about how we're actually living into it and what we're actually offering to people in these relationships, then we're probably going to create more harm than good.
Yeah. And there's plenty of conversation out there about capitalism and anti-capitalism that is misinformed. And that means that a lot of us, like, the information that we have on this stuff is not great information. right? Like,
yes.
So I don't want to blame the individuals who are, you know, if you've been talking about anti-capitalism, in a way where you're like, oh, maybe I didn't quite know what that meant. Like,
cool.
That's not my worry.
Yeah.
But I just feel like there's so many legitimate conversations that we as business owners need to be having about the actual impacts of our behavior and about the trends that we're seeing and how those trends are playing out and how we can do things differently or how we figured out a way to achieve the same outcomes but in a way that's more values aligned that we don't end up having when we leave it at capitalism is bad and wrong, and so I'm going to run my business in a way that is, quote, values aligned, and thus I'm anti-capitalist.
Right, exactly.
No. You're not.
Wah, wah. Well, if we need a segue.
We don't need a segue.
Okay.
I don't know, how many times I need to explain to you that we don't need a segue.
Let me back up. I understand we don't need a segue.
Yes.
The thing I want to say...
Do you understand that I'm going to edit your segue out?
The thing I want to say is this. Don't silence me.
Well, it sounds like you're starting to get into a conversation that should be held for the body of this episode.
Oh.
For now, I just want to say, I'll be back.
Cue the music.
You say cue the music every time.
No, only now.
And I edit it out. I edit it out every time.
It's such a dad thing to do, too.
You are a dad.
Cue the music. You're not going to have much for bloopers on this one. There you go.
Tongue fart.
Now we've got a blooper.